It's Cowboys 49ers, and not to age any of us, but the best I can tell, when you guys beat the 49ers in that first NFC title game, 92 season, January of 93, only Zach Martin, DeMarcus Lawrence, Brian Anger, and Jonathan Hankins were on this earth. That are on the Cowboys roster.
Though, huh?
Yeah. But not the ages. But I do wonder this, because like when you were playing in those classic games in the early 90s, this rivalry already had a history.
Yeah.
You had Roger on your sideline. That meant something to you back then. Do you think it means something to these guys now, or do you think they're just more concerned about the recent history between these teams?
Oh, yeah. They're only worried about here and now and what's happened the last couple of years to them when they played San Francisco in the postseason. And some of those players don't care about that either because they weren't around. But for Dak, I mean, and the others who were, they definitely have memories of that and want to reconcile that. But probably deep down, I know that when I went into that game, there was a lot of talk about the catch and what that rivalry had meant. And I mean, you could feel it a little bit, especially playing at Candlestick where that happened. But it was a great rivalry for us in the 90s. People talk about us and the Eagles and the Giants and the Redskins back in the day and what those rivalries meant. I always felt that our biggest rival was San Francisco because when we played them, it really meant something. And I know Dallas and Philadelphia is still a big rivalry. There's been a lot at stake in recent years with that matchup. But for Dallas, it again is San Francisco because of the fact they've knocked them out of the postseason here the last 2 years. But this is they've always been good games. This is going to be another one, and I don't think it's quite the same because when we used to play them, it seems like we'd always play San Francisco in the regular season, sometime around week 9, week 10, and whoever won that game, we were pretty much assured that was the team that would have home field advantage in the postseason, and that's where we would play the NFC Championship game. And for the most part, that happened. And so there was a lot at stake in the regular season. There's a lot at stake in this game, but I don't think to the same degree. I think there's a chance for Dallas to exercise some demons against them. But at the end of the day, I know that next week we're going to have a lot of conversation about what this game meant and the balance of power in the NFC. But there's still so much football left to be played, and I don't know that this game is going to determine as much as we might think once we get into January and if these teams were to meet up again.
Such an intriguing matchup, so many interesting matchups between the offense and defense on both sides. Let's start with that 49ers offense. How impressive is it, and what Kyle Shanahan produces with different quarterbacks, but with this running game and an offense that just appears to be really hard to defend?
Yeah, they do things that are unique to everyone else in the NFL. I've said it. I've said it on this show. I've said it on broadcast. If I could hire one head coach in the NFL, it'd be Kyle Shanahan. And I think he's the best offensive mind in the game. And you can see it since he took over. The way that and I guess maybe the reason I like it so much is it just reminds me so much of what we did back in our heyday, and it's an old school brand of football that you just don't see much of. You're seeing more of it, but you don't see much of it in today's NFL with all the spread offenses and throwing the football. And you know, he ties everything together, and it is a physical brand of football. And I think the last couple of years, I think San Francisco has just played more physical than Dallas has. Now, Dallas has that style of football as well now, but you've got to be prepared for that. And they're going to run the ball, and they're going to do the play action off of it. It's what they've been doing, but they do such a good job of deploying their receivers, running backs, and creating space, whether it's in the run game, which is really somewhat unique. Fernando and I were talking before we came on. You know, Kyle grew up with his dad. His dad was running the ball a lot in Denver, and everyone was impressed with it. Didn't seem to matter what running back he had back there that they were going to rush for 1,200 yards. And he took that run game, and then he's only expanded it more. So they continue to create space, through movement, through angles, and then they tie it all with the play action. And it's a tough offense to defend. I mean, and they've proven that over the years.
It's our weekly visit with the Hall of Famer Troy Aikman here on the Ticket, and part of that is a pretty inexperienced quarterback who splashed on the scene, and he just hasn't lost in games that he started. And some say, well, he's got this supporting cast, and he's just perfect for the system, and they don't let him do too much. You think Brock Purdy gets underrated by a lot of people just because of that? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And they do have good players, and they've got a good defense, and all the things. I've always said that whatever your weakness is on a team, it shows itself through the position of quarterback. So if you can't stop people, and you're constantly trying to play from behind, then the quarterback is the guy who has to bear the brunt of that, and the ball's on the ground or teams are teeing off on him, and people think, this quarterback, we just, if you're not running the ball, then you got to throw the ball. And so I feel like there's a lot of things that ultimately show up at the quarterback position, and maybe unfairly. And likewise, when you have a lot of good parts around you, then it makes playing the position easier. You don't have to be perfect on every play. You don't have to score on every possession. Their defense is going to do their job. They're going to run the ball. And I don't like the term game manager because I think it takes away from what quarterbacks have to do to win. And you've got to make the throws. It doesn't matter how much you run the ball, how successful you run the ball. There's third downs. You have to make key throws in games, and you have to make key throws in the red zone. And if you don't make those, you're going to have a hard time winning games. And so this notion that, hey, just don't lose the game, I don't buy into that. And for Brock, especially in this offense, there are some offenses that are very quarterback friendly, and there's others that aren't. And this one is extremely quarterback friendly, and we've seen that. And it's not taking anything away from Brock Purdy, and it's not taking anything away from Jimmy Garoppolo. But if you're smart and you make good decisions and you throw the ball accurately, then you have a chance to be really, really good in that system because of what we talked about and the way that Kyle Shanahan he schemes people open. And they've got really, really good players. Now, Brock, if he was a first-round pick, people would be saying this guy's everything that we thought he'd be, and nobody would be questioning anything about him, and they would be talking about him like he's Patrick Mahomes. But because he was the last pick in the draft, you constantly are having to overcome that. Tom Brady had to overcome that as a sixth-round pick. It's just part of it, but here's what I know is Brock Purdy was coached by the same guy who coached me in college at UCLA. My offensive coordinator at UCLA was a guy named Steve Aikman, and that's who coached Brock Purdy in high school in Arizona. And Steve Aikman is one of the best quarterback coaches and best offensive minds that I was around. And so I do know that Brock Purdy was very well coached in high school, and I know that he is really well coached in the pros. I don't know anything about his college, coaches, but I'm assuming he was coached well there too. And I think he's the real deal. I think there's some people that are still skeptical, but I'm not. I think he's the real deal. He seems wired the right way, and he's doing a lot of great stuff.
It wasn't really surprising that the Cowboys beat the Patriots, but it was a little surprising that they gave Bill Belichick his worst loss ever, wasn't it?
For sure. I mean, to be in this league that long, what was the difference?
35.
35 points.
Yeah.
Which is hard to do in the NFL. Then I think back to Miami putting up 70 the Denver Broncos, but it's a lot of points. But when you've been a head coach as long as he has, to think that was the worst loss that he's taken, I tend to look at that and say, wow, this guy really has been a hell of a coach. Because even the best of coaches, they just sometimes, it's like old Barry Switzer used to say, sometimes you eat the bear and sometimes the bear eats you, and it doesn't matter how good you are. So that's impressive to his coaching tenure.
Yeah, it's Barry's birthday today.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I was just texting with him last week. He told me he was. His phrases and stuff. But yeah, he's I guess he's 86, right? He was telling me it's about to be 4 years from 90. So
wow, that's amazing. And yeah, your relationship with him, we've talked about it before, but pretty remarkable that you have the fact that the travels takes you to him recruiting you to go to Oklahoma, and then not too much time passes, and there you are reunited and trying to win a Super Bowl together.
Yeah, my life in a lot of ways has been a little bit like Groundhog's Day, and I knew Barry. I first met Barry, I think, when I was 14, and around the same time I met Jimmy. And Jimmy was at Oklahoma State. Barry was at Oklahoma.
Wow. I
went to his football camp. He came to my house, recruited me. I told Jimmy I was going to go to Oklahoma State. I changed my mind and went to Oklahoma. And when I came to Dallas and Jimmy left, first of all, it's crazy that Jimmy became my head coach after, I'd known him and told him I was going to go to Oklahoma State. And then when he left, Terry Donahue actually got, no, that was after Switzer. But when Barry comes in, then I'm thinking, wow, I would never have imagined that I'd be playing for Barry again. And then, we've reconnected here over the last few years, and Barry is one of my favorite people. He really is. And last year, as you know, George, he came to the Highway to Henrietta, and it was awesome. He reached out to me and said, hey, I really want to come. I want to bring some friends. And, at 85 years old, and it was hot as could be. And, so it's fantastic. And, he's a legend, as he should be, and you can't even cross the border into Oklahoma and not know you're in Switzer country. So, what a great career he's had, and one of the real characters, of life. He's just fantastic.
Hey, we had a topic come up earlier this week about quarterback voice that I wanted to ask you about, because I saw a quarterback interviewed a couple weeks ago. I can't remember who it was, and he said that his dad coached him from a very young age and told him, you got to work on your quarterback voice. And everybody noticed Dak calling audibles this week with his new Here We Go. Was that something that you had to work on, or have you heard other quarterbacks working on, or did it just naturally progress where your voice got stronger to shout over the crowd noise?
It's not something I worked on, and I do know that from time to time when we talk to some coaches, they talk about their quarterback needing. Who is it I talked to? It was Kevin Stefanski. Whoever their backup quarterback was, I know it was DTR from UCLA. Dorian Thompson Robinson. He said if he gets in he said he needs to drink some whiskey and smoke cigars because his voice isn't strong enough, And so. Yeah, I don't have the strongest voice. I shot this Choctaw commercial a few weeks back that's airing where I'm acting like I'm audibling at the roulette table. And
yeah, good call there too. Looks like you won.
We did. Yeah, of course we won. And but I lost my voice after about 3. I said, look, I've got like one more time to do this, and and it would happen to me when we played on the road, and we didn't use. Back then, we didn't use silent count because we weren't in the gun and all that. So no, my voice was not very strong. It was a bit. I don't want to say it was an issue, but it was challenging, I guess, on the road. I'd get on the plane on the flight home, and I couldn't hardly talk. So, but Dak's impressive. Yeah, I don't know where that came from. When Chan Gailey came in as the head coach. That's when we first started yelling, pointing out the mic, 56 the mic, 56 is the mic. And you hear it all the time. And I'm thinking, I said it every play for 70 plays in the game. 56 is the mic. And you're like, if 56 is the mic, why do I got to keep pointing it out? I mean, can everyone not see that and it's so Dak, I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, gosh, he has to do that every snap? I mean, come on. Here we go.